Hello, and welcome to the Castle Talk podcast, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming series Young Captain Nemo from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. Tonight, we're talking to Kevin J. Anderson, author of over 130 books, 54 of which have been on national or international bestseller lists, with lots of his books as well as his own books, as well as Star Wars hits, X-Files, Dune novels. Kevin has been won or been nominated for the Bram Stoker, Shamus, Hugo, Nebula, Scribe, and Colorado Book Award. Kevin and his wife, Rebecca Muesta, are also publishers of Wordfire Press, publishing a wide variety of SF, and fantasy titles from writers as disparate as Alan Dean Foster, Frank Herbert, Mike Resnick, on and on. He and Rebecca have been married for 25 years and live in a castle in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Welcome, Kevin.
Well, after that, there's not much time for the interview, is there, after listing all that? But
That is
sure,
that
we'll
is a
have
heck
stuff
of
to
a
talk about.
yeah. It could have been a lot longer too. That was my cut down version of the Kevin J. Anderson biography.
Well,
So
I like to do stuff. I don't want to do the same thing every day. I like to try different things. My bucket list is long, and I've checked everything off. So then I wrote another bucket list, and I'm checking everything off of that, and doing another one, and been to 6 of the 7 continents, and been in hot air ballooning and on an aircraft carrier on the Pacific Stock Exchange floor, and it's of course it's all research for my writing, but
yeah.
I like doing stuff. I climb mountains. I've climbed all the 14,000-foot peak mountains here in Colorado, and did the 500 miles of the Colorado Trail, and I'm doing that because there's other stuff besides even just the writing that I'm doing, and then
But you've actually
it
talked
just
about how you get writing done. You might be doing we call them 14ers around here. You might be climbing a 14er and then stop and narrate something from one of the books.
oh no, I don't stop. No, I do that. In fact, I'm climbing a pretty difficult one this Saturday, and I will be doing a bunch of notes while I'm up there. I'm about to start a big epic fantasy novel, and I've got it sketched out and outlined, and I'll be doing like some character stuff and world building stuff, and mainly on the lower elevations. As you get really high toward the top of the peak, there's not much air, and it's a lot steeper, and you're panting a lot more. And my typist once compared me to when I'm dictating mountain climbing. She said that it sounds like she's transcribing an obscene phone call. So,
And you're
but
cutting all of
so
that
I
out.
do, yeah. So I do that. I go out hiking the trails here in Colorado, and I dictate my stuff because that's just the way I've taught myself. Instead of sitting cooped up in an office and pounding away on a keyboard, I'm out walking in the forest, and the words are formed in your brain, and whether they come out your fingers or come out your mouth, it just depends on which route you take. And
A lot of
I've
us
learned how
tell
to do it
us.
dictating.
I mean, but we tell ourselves things, and I say this because I'm kind of lecturing at myself. But we tell ourselves things like, "Well, I need a 3-hour block so that I can, or I
Oh,
need to
BS.
be at the library." But you're saying that's not true. If you and I were sitting, so here's my question: if you and I were sitting at the airport waiting to catch a flight, and you have 45 minutes, could you sit down and produce some work right then?
Of course.
Just even
Well,
with
what
noise around you and all that stuff, you don't need a special like situation
it's
to get
called
your book.
noise canceling headphones.
Ah,
I put the earplugs in, and I play my music, and I'm working. But a more specific answer to your point, though, is I like to write my stuff when I'm out hiking and after I've thought about it, and I'll go out and do an actual writing session for 5 miles on the trail or something like that. When I'm in the airport is the time I usually spend to do editing chapters that have come back from the typist, or um, blogs or articles or something, because it doesn't require quite so much concentration just to answer emails and to write an
right.
essay or a blog, or to edit something that's there in front of you. If I were writing something from scratch, I would like to have more concentration, peace, and quiet. And this isn't even one of the books we were planning to plug tonight, but I did write something called $1 Million Productivity. We have a whole series of writing instruction books that Wordfire publishes. That's the $1 Million Writing Series. And that's not all hyperbole. Every single author has made over $1 million in various publishing things. So we pick
Hmm.
real guys that really know what they're doing. And I'm pretty well known as a productive person. So I wrote a book called $1 Million Productivity, which
I have this book.
I think
Just so you know.
I have it's 11 different techniques that you can try to. There's two aspects to it. You can either find more time to write, or you can get more writing done in the time you have. And so there's different pieces of advice for that. And one of them is the use every 3 minutes. That if you've only got 5 minutes or 3 minutes when you're waiting for the dentist office, then you can get 3 or 5 minutes worth of stuff done, whether it's outlining a scene or jotting down some character notes or editing a couple of paragraphs, whatever, that you use every minute that you have, because I don't know anybody who has the luxury of, I'm going to sit here and not be interrupted for the next 7 hours so I can concentrate.
Very rare.
Most of us don't have lives like that.
Yeah. I have to say, I just had that for like a week. I went, I took days off. I let everybody know I was leaving. I went to my grandmother's farm. I was, many, many hours from the middle of nowhere. And then, yes, then you can have, but, like 8 or
But
10 or
that's an
12 or
anomaly.
24.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
I mean,
really
you
weird.
can't.
It was very strange. And, not even as helpful as you might think. It turns out, really honestly, an hour and a half at the library is pretty good. That's kind of about as much as much time as I really want to take advantage of.
Well, and one of the things I do a lot of talks like in Salt Lake City for like the Mormon writers conferences and things, and a lot of those writers are mothers that have 4 or 5 kids, and they have managed to find a way. That kid goes down for a nap for a half an hour, bam, they get 31 minutes worth of writing done in that half an hour, because that's the only half an hour they're going to get. And if it means something to you and you want to get the writing done, then you'll find a way to do it. I had another co-author of mine, Doug Beeson, who was colonel in the Air Force. He worked for the President's Science Office. In the Air Force, he's technically on call 24/7, so he never was able to say, I'm taking this day off to do writing.
Sure.
But he wanted to get his novel done, so instead of getting up at 6:30 in the morning to go into work, he would get up at 5:30 in the morning, so he had 1 hour to write before he had to go into work. And I wouldn't want to get up that early in the morning if I didn't have to, but he had to, because that was his only time to write.
That's actually advice that people who are really into the NaNoWriMo event, which I've never done, but it sounds like a good way of motivating one another. That they say, listen, get up at 5:30 in the morning and do your writing before you go to work. If the understood reason being, if that's the only way that you can get some writing in, and I reckon it is.
Well, and you're going to say, well, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to get up that early, or I don't want to stay up that late, or I don't want to, that means you might have to give something up. And if you want to be a writer, think about it as if saying that you want to be an Olympic gymnast. Look at the people on the Olympic gymnastics team. They don't go, I don't want to get up at 5:30 in the morning because it's too hard to practice, or I don't want to put in the time to do it. They do it because they really want to achieve well in their sport. And writing is very much. I mean, nobody very much like that. Nobody ever said it was supposed to be this quick and easy, relaxing career, because then everybody'd be doing it. Oh, wait, everybody is doing it now. But, oh, well, that's a different subject.
Now we have other issues, but I mean, I have talked to people before where I've said, listen, if you really want to do this, you could decide right now, it's, the 1st of September, basically. You could just decide, starting on 1st of September, you're going to do 5,000 words a week, and you could have a book done by, second quarter of next year. And all it will take is that. And and listen, provided you don't die, second quarter of next year is going to come, no matter what. And you'll either have a book done or you won't. But you can do it. all that's required is and the calendar will tick regardless.
Well, and the story goes about like John Grisham, who was a lawyer, and he wanted to be a writer, and he didn't have any time for it because he had a full load of cases and stuff. So he's a lawyer, so he's used to writing on yellow legal pads and stuff. And this may be an apocryphal story, but it sounds good anyway. That he decided that before he went to sleep at night, that he would write 1 page of his novel in a yellow legal pad. He'd just write 1 page, and anybody can write 1 page. And the 1 page meant that within a year he had a 365-page novel done. And there you go. That's
not
all it took.
Impossible. It's not unthinkable. It's a little too perfect, but but the lesson is certainly true. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Well, I just did one. I did a 208,000 word novel, which, for those of you who don't think about words, that's a big fat novel.
That's big. Like it's like twice a typical. It's twice
it's a
the
big
length
fat
of
fantasy
a long
novel.
Yeah.
I wrote that in 6 weeks flat.
Good Lord.
The first draft, and then I spend months editing it. I mean, you don't say that it's perfect, the first draft, but once you get it down on paper, you can fix it. And
Absolutely.
that's that's the hard part, is getting it down on paper or electrons or whatever you put it on. So
Before we talk about
anyway,
the two that are actually coming out, you mentioned a fantasy earlier. Is that the Spine of the Dragon book that you were talking about?
yeah, that's the 208,000 word book that I just I did all my world building, all of my plotting. I outlined it. It was I think 96 chapters, and
Hmm.
I knew the characters, I knew the plot, and I write very detailed outlines, so I know exactly what chapter 5 is going to be and chapter 6 is going to be.
Oh,
And 96 chapters, had it all outlined. I go out and I have my recorder. I'll go out every single morning. I'll walk either on the bike path around here or go somewhere for a nice trail or wherever. Every single morning I'll go out and I'll write 2 chapters and come back in. And 2 chapters means that in 45 days I can do 90 chapters, or 48 days I do the 96 chapters, whatever. 48 days, that's 6 weeks. I'm done with the
what's a
novel.
chapter? Is a chapter like a scene, or is it a couple scenes, or what defines that?
Well, I have lots of different points of view, so a chapter is whatever the adventure is for
Ah,
that person.
sure.
It tends to be, for me, 2,500 to 3,000 words long. So that means every day, routinely, I'm writing 5 or 6,000 words,
5 or
and
six
that's
thousand words.
that's the morning, and then I come back in and do emails and stuff, and then the afternoon I spend editing whatever came back from the typist, and I spend all my that's the ideal time, but what really happens is most of my spare time is taken up with all kinds of Wordfire Press stuff, because I'm the publisher of Wordfire Press. So the 3/4 of the email I get is business relating to the publishing house, with authors asking about something or needing books ordered or bookstores inquiring about things. So it's
And that's a totally
yeah.
different head. For that, you have to n- there's editorial stuff. You have to literally be reading all these manuscripts, both that you're publishing or that you're not publishing. In other words, both the
Well,
stuff that you're
honestly,
preparing
I
for
don't know. We
publishing.
have we have an acquisitions editor who goes through the slush pile, so
Oh, good. Well,
that's
there you
not
go.
me, at least. But there are some of maybe 2 books a year I will personally edit, as in with the
Hmm,
manuscript, and I'm marking all over the place on it. And I'm doing one right now by Kat Rambo, who's a well-known award-winning short fiction writer.
sure.
This is her second novel. We published her first one called Beasts of Tabat, and it did very well for us, nominated for a couple of awards. And this is the sequel to it.
That's fabulous.
And her original editor was no longer doing freelance stuff for us, and so this is too important a book. I wanted to do it myself, so I'm editing that one. So I'm editing that, and I'm doing publishing stuff, and we're teaching writing workshops, and I'm doing public speaking things, and we're doing convention appearances. Last year I did 22 conventions, like Denver Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con, Phoenix
Yeah,
Comic Con, and all those. So that sucks up a lot of my time and energy too, and I still managed to write 3 books last year. And yeah, I
it's
don't sleep
fabulous.
very much, I guess.
No, but that's fabulous. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about this, the Spine of the Dragon, though, is you said you're doing something kind of innovative, which is that you're allowing your online community to see earlier drafts of the book, like unpublished
Right.
drafts. So
Well, I mean,
isn't that counterintuitive to what everybody says to do? Like, don't put drafts out there, don't let anybody see what's going on.
well, what I did with this one is more of a here's what happens in real life. So I finished writing it in April or something like that, and I'm active on social media. You know that you're on my Facebook page and stuff. I'm
Sure.
active, and I always say, "Here, I'm working on this book, and I just did this chapter today, and I killed a sea monster today while I was out hiking," and things like that. Just because I like talking about what I'm doing. And we have so many of my fans were like, "Well, it's great that you're talking about Spine of the Dragon, but when do I get to read it?" And
Hmm.
in the so I didn't have a contract for this one. I'm writing it just on my own, and then my agent has taken out the manuscript now, and he sent it to um, 12 different publishers who I hope will get one or more of them interested. But he sent it out in like April or May, and publishing means that everybody received it, and then they all went on vacation all summer long. So it's
Yeah.
just sitting there. So I don't even know who's going to buy the book yet. And then when they do buy the book, they're going to have their own editor go through it with me. I'll probably have to do another rewrite pass. I'll have some test readers. My wife is one of my test readers, and we go through and do some polishing up. And then it'll get slotted into their calendar, and then it'll eventually come out. So what you're looking at, I'm talking about finishing this book in April because I was all very excited about it, but the fans
Yeah.
could actually go to the bookstore and buy a copy of it to read in 2 years.
Right.
And they didn't want to wait 2 years. And so I said, well, if you really want to read it, I basically put up a subscription page on my own website, which is
Ah,
wordfire.com, and I
sure.
said, look, for $30, if you want to read the book, you'll pay $30 to buy the hardcover anyway. If you want to read the book, pay $30 now, and I will let you read the drafts as I'm editing them. And you've got a bunch of people signed up for it, and there's even the forum and stuff so that they can say, I hated this part, or you forgot to resolve this character, or whatever it is.
Wow.
So they're part of the process, but it's all done now. So if you sign, here's my pitch: go to the wordfire.com if you want to sign up. You can read the whole draft manuscript. It's in its second or third draft now. It's pretty polished. It's pretty good, I think. But it was the really cool stuff was like in March and April when I was writing it, because I set this up so people could sign up for it as I was writing it. So
Mhm.
in fact, I even had a VIP level. I do stuff with like rock concerts and stuff. So here's the VIP all access level. Um,
Yeah.
for a higher price, they could get it, and I would upload my audios dictating the chapters every day as I wrote one. So
No
I'd come
kidding.
in from my hike and I'd upload the chapters, and the people who had signed up at that level could actually just listen to my dictated chapters every single day, including the rain in the background or me yelping because I almost stepped on a tarantula and stuff like that. So that was really a cool. I called it I'm walking on a tightrope in my underwear. So I'm out there writing this stuff, and they're reading it as it's coming out of my mouth. So there's no editing. There's no. This is the way I wrote it, and it was just a kind of a refreshing and exciting thing, I thought, to be putting it up there. And it's still available. You can pay the higher level now, and you can still listen to all of the daily audios and kind of listen. And you'll find that I'm hiking 10 miles away from my house, and I get to the point where, and they go to the innkeeper who I can't remember his name is, so let's just say Bill, and we'll do global replace afterward. And because
Yeah,
the minor
sure.
characters from 20 chapters ago, I might not remember their name, and so it's a real looking over my shoulder as I'm writing it, and people could sign up for that. And of course, now you can still sign up and read the draft of the book. You could still listen to the audios. Oh, and I put up my full detailed chapter by chapter outline. The full I have two outlines. One is sort of a sketchy one, and one is the super detailed one. And for writers who wanted to study my process, this is it. I mean, you couldn't do any better than if you were sort of shadowing me through the whole thing, because you're looking at the outline, you're looking at the drafts, you're looking at the listening to the audio, you're seeing how I put a book together, and then 208,000 words. Oh, page count for you guys who don't think in words, it was like 750 manuscript pages long,
I'm kidding.
all in 6 weeks. So
That seems really innovative. I mean, to be honest, the innovative thing to me about that, and I'd heard of once before, there was like an Indiana Jones guy doing an Indiana Jones book years ago, and he would write chapters, and people would give him feedback on the chapters. And this is a long time ago. It's like the '90s. But
Well,
what you're
Harlan
talking
Ellison
about is
used
a
to sit in the window of a bookstore with his typewriter, and he'd be writing stories just right in front of everybody. But
Well, this is
that's
very
Harlan.
similar to that, and it's different from I'm this is a full sort of innovation of a kind of a writer's workshop, and
Mhm.
and I think that's really cool. I think it's certainly of interest if you're a fan who's into writing, even more so than if you're just a fan, because it's very sort of how it's all done and how it's all made, and that I think there's great innovation there. When people, if I were talking to a 15-year-old who, in high school, and she's just written her book, because I run into these people all the time, right? And and she goes, "Would it be okay for me to put my book online and let people give me feedback?" I have to say, I would probably say, "Don't do that." I save it for when you share it with an editor. Do it. Find a community, share it with them. But what you're talking about is, first of all, you're a very different person from a 15-year-old freshman. And
Well, my
that
first draft is probably better than her final draft would be. I mean, just because I've got a lot more experience on it.
just
And
the experience, right? All of that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And you sort of have nothing to fear. There's no editor is going to go, oh, well, I don't want to talk about this because other people have had exposure to it. Whereas if you're if you're again our freshman, I think that's something that you'd have to worry about for that kid is I want work that nobody else has seen because this kid has I want to be the one to establish who she is or who he is and how their career is going to go. It's
Well,
really
but
interesting.
that's really changed a lot because it used to be that you could never, if you indie published your book, that no major publisher would ever want one. Well,
Yeah.
now major publishers look at indie writers to see who's successful and then try to scarf them up. It's just it
That's
used
interesting.
to
When I
be.
said yeah earlier, I was thinking, yeah, I've always heard that as well, and I was just anticipating, where this might be going. Is that true? You've heard like that we're in a different era now from where we were like 20 years ago, I suppose.
Oh my gosh, it's night and day. It's completely different. It's I mean now what they'll do is people who have indie published their books, they'll just mail them off to a publisher, and of course it takes years for it to go through their system, and then somebody will finally go, well, what were your sales on your own? What are your social media platforms? How can you promote this book? And the catch-22 is by the time the authors figure out how to make it successful by themselves, then they don't really need the big publisher anyway. So it's kind of strange that way, but
Wow.
it's no longer here. We'll put it in very clear terms. It used to, when as a writer in a book, it used to have to be an absolute virgin bride wearing white, and now
Yeah.
nobody cares if you're wearing ivory dresses or cream colored dresses or whatever because it doesn't. You're getting your different audience, and it's going out there. So it's
Yeah.
it's a completely different world in publishing, but it's changing. I mean, dramatically. You watch, well, I mean, everybody watched Borders go out of business a couple of years ago,
Oh
and
yes.
Barnes and Noble's shutting down a bunch of stores, but Amazon's taking off like crazy, and everybody's reading books on their iPhones and iPads, and it's you don't want to complain too much that the business is going down the toilet because imagine the people who were writing like those science fiction radio plays in the 30s.
Yeah.
They were probably grousing about our whole business is going down the toilet. Now what are we going to do? Well,
Yeah.
then learn
Yeah.
a different way to tell a story. And stories are stories. If you, I'm in fact this afternoon I'm writing a graphic novel script. I've done a lot of
Sure.
comics work, and that's completely different from writing big novels. And
Well, in fact, to the contrary, I kind of feel like that there's never been a better time. I mean, I feel like having started my own professional writing career 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I can't remember. Anyway, uh, back then there were a lot less publishers. So I guess was it easier to live on your writing 25 years ago? I'm not even sure I would say that. I feel like it's easier to find a place for people to read your novels now than there was. So I don't even think novels are dead. I mean, and you're still writing
oh
them.
no, not.
But I mean,
Although I would say though, like the 90s or so were what I would think of as the golden age. The writers like me were getting big advances, and publishers were publishing all kinds of things. And I mean, I could sneeze and get work. I mean, that was there were people, and there were a lot of publishers then that they then grabbed the big 12 publishers now are down to big 4, I think,
yeah,
because they keep gobbling each other up. And that's the big boys, though. But you also have all these other options to indie publish, to go with smaller presses like Wordfire Presses. You've got 3 books with us. 2 books with us?
yeah.
I can't, 2
Two.
books
I've
with us.
got I've
Yes,
got 2
2.
with you. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
and they look nice, but the thing is that I can produce the book, but I don't have a giant marketing department. So we sort of rely on our own authors to go out and promote it. It's more like a cooperative thing rather
mhm,
than I'm the big publisher, you poor author, just give me your book and let me do the rest. Well, that's not how we do it. And there are so many ways for super gung ho, ambitious indie
yeah,
authors to get their books out there. But on the other hand, there are 10 billion other people trying to do it. So
yeah,
you're also in a little bit of a signal to noise ratio thing that if you used to be writing TV scripts and you wrote the TV script for a show that was on NBC, ABC, or CBS, which were the only 3 networks up until 1985 or something like that when Fox was on.
exactly. Yeah,
If you were one of those, you were like king of the hill because you had a show on network TV and there were only 3 networks and 1/3 of America watched your show.
yeah,
Well, it was awfully hard to break in then because there weren't very many scripts.
right.
Now, there's so many more opportunities. There's so many more cable channels and sci-fi channels, and there's a horror channel, and there's Netflix originals and Amazon originals and Hulu originals and all of this stuff. They need content. People have to write all this stuff. So there are options, but there is no way any show can get the audience that even a lame show when it was one of 3 networks got.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the jokes, this has been going on for a long time because I remember people remarking that already there was so much erosion when Seinfeld went off the air, which I want to say is close to 20 years ago now. But somebody said the funny thing is that more people watched any given episode of Who's the Boss than watched the finale of Seinfeld because already the audience was eroding across,
Oh, because
you
Who's the
know,
Boss was 10 years earlier or something?
10 or 15
I
years
don't know.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and Who's the Boss was just a big, popular
Mediocre
sit
show.
yeah, it was
Come
just a
on, we know it
sitcom. It's
wasn't
just
that
a
great.
just a perfectly adequate network sitcom. But that was the point, is that just any old meat and potatoes show had vastly more audience than the premium show 15 years after that. And I'm telling you, we would kill for the audience of the finale of Seinfeld today.
Well, and the
but
same thing. I was writing comic books back in the mid 1990s. I was writing Star Wars comics,
Mhm.
Tales of the Jedi books and Jedi Academy books for Dark Horse, and I
Yeah.
started the run. I think it was 1996 or something, and the first issue of this Star Wars series called Dark Lords of the Sith that I wrote with Tom Veitch showed up at, I don't remember. There is a comics bestseller list, kind of like the New York Times bestseller list. So it's the
Yeah.
comic issues, and our first issue of Dark Lords of the Sith was like number 5,
Mhm.
and it sold 450,000 copies of issue number 1. And then, like 10 years later, when I had
That's a
kind of
remarkable
finished my
number.
yeah, and but 10 years later, when I'd sort of finished my run of Star Wars comics and had done a bunch, and I was wrapping up a series called Redemption, a different one of the Star Wars things, and I'd finished it up, and that came out, and surprise, it hit number 5 on the comic bestseller list, and that sold 45,000 copies. So it was decimated. It was a tenth as
Yeah.
many sales to hit the same point in the bestseller list. So that shows you just how much the whole market had imploded.
Okay, I'm looking right now at the top 300 ICV2 for right now, right? Batman, your latest Batman issue sold 102,000 copies. Let me tell you, in the 1970s, if Batman sold 102,000 copies, they would cancel it
Oh, I
because
knew
at that
people in the golden age, the early '90s, the late '80s,
yeah.
the John Burns and the Chris
Yeah,
Wolverine guy,
Claremont.
Chris
That was
Claremont.
the height
Yeah,
of what was
uh,
called the Silver Age. That was yeah,
right.
when it was like
And
crazy
they were.
popular.
Yeah, I didn't mean the golden age in the strict. I just
Right, right,
meant that
right.
it was the real heyday.
Yeah,
But I mean, these people were writing X-Men comics or whatever, and they were buying private jets.
yeah.
And now we're buying a Mini Cooper, and
But
but that's
you can
still getting us
always
where we need to go.
I know this is tiresomely positive, but there's so many different ways of looking at it because as that pond has shrunk, there's still, as you pointed out, there's still all these opportunities to get your stuff done. I don't know. I mean, you're nobody ever said be a writer so you can get rich and famous. That's for sure. I mean, there's so many better
Well,
ways.
yeah, people thought that was the truth, and none of us writers thought that was the truth. But you do it because you love it, and
Yeah.
but that is one of the things. But compare it to the music business, that there's this huge surge in indie music because you don't need to sign with a label anymore, so they
Right.
can do whatever they want. And now you're not going to get hits like the Beatles that are selling that many billions of copies, but you'll get your music out there. It just means that, and I know this because I know a lot of musicians who are doing it. Even like well-known musicians, they'll record something themselves, but then they'll go on tour because they make their money by playing, small venues and bar gigs and stuff. That's where they make their money, and then they sell the CDs afterward. Nobody. When's the last time you walked to a record store to buy a CD or an album or well, whatever? I buy it on Amazon, but
Absolutely.
that's
I mean, and
how
I
it's
want to
changed.
ask you about Tales of Dune, but there's something that you just said that I thought about. Vonnegut commented about this in Bluebeard. This is back in the late 80s. He wrote a novel called Bluebeard. I'm pretty sure it was Bluebeard. If it's not, then I really apologize. But this is the one where the guy's a painter. And what he talked about was that there was a time pre-mass reproduction, when you'd be the village expert dancer and you'd be the village expert singer, and your purpose as an artist was to sort of serve the needs of yourself and the people like within walking distance of where you lived. And then for probably the last century or so, that got totally disrupted. And you've got this world, well, no, a couple centuries, where you've got this world of mass production, and everybody focuses on just a couple, and there's only a few dancers for the whole planet. And I think now we're seeing that whole mass production sort of singular zeitgeist, this monoculture, just kind of break down again and kind of return to what Vonnegut was suggesting was the way things ought to be. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think so.
Well, it depends. If you want to be rich and famous, it's hard to be rich and famous if you're just the dancer in the town with 20 people watching you. And
Right.
um,
No, no,
and,
for
and I'm not
sure.
saying that as a
Absolutely.
bad thing. It's, do you want, as as a writer, do you want to earn millions of dollars and then go on talk shows and do the whole Truman Capote thing or something, or do you just want to tell your stories, and if people enjoy them, then they enjoy them? And there is a very strong argument to be made that you should, if you want to be a writer, you should find a decent career that pays well with a job that you enjoy so that you can be supported and not have to bite your fingernails about how you're going to pay the house payment or the car payment, and then
Yeah.
just write whatever you want whenever you have the time for it.
Yeah.
And that may end up producing the best work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if you're
I
trying to
agree.
if you're trying to, and this is me. I mean, I have to pay my mortgage and the insurance and the groceries and everything with the money that I make from writing. Therefore, I need to make money from writing, and so that affects the decisions that I make. Where we've got a big medical bill coming up or something, so I need to make sure that we can pay for it. If I didn't have to worry about making money with my writing, then I could be writing whatever I wanted. That doesn't mean that it would be better or worse. It just would affect my choices differently. But, now if they throw lots of money at me to write the evil My Little Pony novel, and I'd have to do a lot of research, but maybe I wouldn't take that one. But you know what I mean. I mean,
I
there
actually
are
really
people
thought
that
you were being serious. I would completely buy an evil My Little Pony novel, but nevertheless, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Absolutely. And also, even in this world you're talking about, there's still going to be some people who get a lot luckier than others. I mean, and so I think it's not crazy to shoot for, I'm going to make a really good living. I mean, I don't think that's unwise at all. To that end, let's talk about a couple of new projects you have coming out. So one is very much a franchise novel, and the other is your own personal franchise. So those are Tales of Dune, a new expanded edition, and one is a new Dan Shamble omnibus, the so-called Zomnibus. Now, first of all,
the
Tales
Zomnibus.
of Dune. What's the deal with the new Tales of Dune? Because I know this collection existed, but I think it's grown. Isn't that right?
Well, what happened was we wrote over the Brian Herbert and I have written, I think, 15 Dune novels over the last 18 years. And over the course of that, every once in a while, we would write a short story in the Dune universe that sometimes they would connect book one and book two in a series or something. And the publisher would just release those as like promotional giveaways to promote the new book that's coming out. Or we
Yeah.
wrote one and sold it to Amazing Stories, or we sold one to, I think, Jim Bain's universe or something like that. And this was just, I mean, it came to the point where here's a short story, we wanted to write it, and Tor.com would publish it or something like that.
Mhm.
And we ended up with, well, early on, there was a couple of the stories printed in a book called The Road to Dune, sort of like a Silmarillion of Dune with a bunch of Frank Herbert's notes in it and some unpublished chapters and things. And when we published that through Tor Books, we had, I think, 3 short stories that had been out there. And we said, well, let's just throw the 3 short stories that were in there. And it was sort of a grab bag kind of book, a bunch of little parts. So those were out, and then Brian and I wrote another short story, and we wrote another one, and another one. And in fact, I think there were 3 of them that were not printed in The Road to Dune. And so we thought, well, the fans wanted to read the Dune short stories because they wanted to collect everything, and 3
Yeah.
stories didn't make a book. So we just put up an ebook called Tales of Dune that had these 3 orphaned short stories, for lack of a better term for it. And then we wrote another one, and then we wrote another one, And I talked to Tom Doherty, the publisher of Tor Books, who had done The Road to Dune more than 10 years ago. And I said, Tom, would you mind if we took the 3 stories that were in The Road to Dune and just pulled them out and gathered the other, I think there were 4 or 5 short stories. There were the 3 that were in the Tales of Dune ebook, and just little pieces. And we just said, we want to just do a complete edition and put them all together, and Wordfire is going to publish it. Because Tor Books just wanted the big novels that they could really push. And so I asked him, and he said, sure, no problem. So at Wordfire, we just put those together and brought it out, and it turned out that we had a beautiful cover painting by Stephen Ewell, who had done all of the other Dune cover paintings.
You mentioned that. I was going to say it before you even had to plug it yourself. That's a great cover. I mean, if you have in mind, I think Dune books, it's a beautiful cover. Anyway, go ahead, continue.
Well, Steve is a very good friend of mine. I think he's done 20 or more of my covers over the years. And I had seen this painting. He had done it for another Dune book, but they wanted him to do a different one. So they hired him to do a different one. So he had this completed Dune painting that looked just gorgeous. So look, you don't have to buy it, you listeners. Just go and look on Amazon and see the cover for Tales of Dune. See how
but they should buy it. First of all,
of course they should buy it, but I don't want to pressure them too much.
Yes,
of course. So I knew he had this painting that he'd already been paid for that he couldn't do anything with, and we're doing Tales of Dune, and I said, well, that's like the perfect cover art for this, and so we reached an agreement on letting us use that for the cover, and it's utterly spectacular. And you said it's a franchise book because it's in the same universe that the other Dune stuff is. But it's not our own self-published Dune novel that we put together. This is just the short stories, and the fans want to read them all in one place other than hunting and scavenging for them all over the place. Now, it's interesting with the other thing, writing what I want to write, was what I was just talking. Now, I don't want to say I don't want to write the Dune books, because I really enjoy working with Brian on those, and they're very challenging and fulfilling. But years ago, I just wanted to write this cornball, really, really funny zombie private detective story. I like The Walking Dead, and I like zombie movies and the violent, nasty, dark ones as much as anybody else. But after a while, you just get tired of that, and you think, it's really time for Spaceballs instead. And I just wanted to write a completely stupid slapstick, like The Naked Gun zombie detective who solves crimes with werewolves and mummies and ghosts and vampires, and it's a world where all the monsters have come back and they live in their own part of town called the Unnatural Quarter, and of course they have the same problems anybody else does. They get divorced, they have affairs, they go bankrupt, they have kids they can't get that cause trouble, and so this is a zombie. Well, he was a human detective, but he got killed on a case, but he came back from the dead and back on the case, and he solves his own murder, and he has a ghost for a girlfriend, and he's got a bleeding heart liberal lawyer for his business partner, and his BHF, his best human friend, is a cop who is non-politically correct and got in so much trouble for telling ethnic jokes that they assigned him to the monster quarter where he couldn't offend anybody. And this is my cast of characters, and the first novel was called Death Warmed Over.
How many Dan Shamble books have you done now?
Well, I'll finish the story because it actually comes around in a full circle.
Sorry.
So I just wrote this. I snuck it in. I took 4 weeks to write the first book. I snuck it in between my other deadlines, and I sent it to my agent. I thought it was hilarious. All my test readers thought it was hilarious. Everybody loved it. My agent got it, and he said, well, but you're Kevin Anderson. You write big, fat, epic science fiction novels. What am I supposed to do with a funny zombie novel? And I said, sell it. And so he sent it around, and all my other publishers did but Kevin Anderson can't write funny zombie books. And I said, well, did you read it? And they said, yeah, we loved it. Well, then I can write a funny zombie book. So it kind of went around and around, and finally we settled with Kensington Publishers, who's kind of a big Western and romance publisher. And they published Death Warmed Over, and then they published the sequel, Unnatural Acts, and then the next one, Hair Raising, and then the next one was called Slimy Underbelly. So I wrote these 4 novels, and in the meantime, I'm writing all of these Dan Shamble short stories. I had like 9 or 10 of the short stories because I just love writing with this character. And after 4 novels, I was kind of getting less than impressed with the how the books were doing, and the publisher was getting less than impressed, and for two different reasons, of course, because the publisher always blames the author, and the author always blames
Sure.
the publisher. Um,
No doubt
and I
about it.
kind of wanted the rights to Dan Shamble back, because I wanted to continue the series, and I wanted to keep writing my own, and I wanted to publish them through Wordfire, so I could do it myself. And so the way that you break a contract with the publisher is you offer them something that you know they're never going to want. And so I said, I've got a new Dan Shamble book. It's all 10 of my Dan Shamble short stories in a collection. And they went, ooh, we don't want that. And so I got the rights back.
Voila.
And I published that collection called Working Stiff, and that did really well. And finally, what we ended up, and I got the rights back to Death Warmed Over and Unnatural Acts. And so what I ended up doing was, I wanted people to be able to read the first novel plus all the short stories. Like, this is your big introduction to Dan Shamble. And so we put them both together, Working Stiff and Death Warmed Over, in one volume called the Dan Shamble Zomnibus, because it's the right word for it. And we just released that. It's in trade paperback. It's also one of the first hardcovers that we've ever done, and all ebook formats and stuff. And
what's the significance of hardcover? Do you do hardcovers because libraries like them, or are there people out there who just don't
collectors
want a
like
paperback?
them.
I'm sorry?
Collectors like them. They like signed copies of the hardcovers instead of the paperback. And with the new, not to get off on a tangent with the new technology, but if you know how to do it, it's not really that much harder to do a hardcover than it is to do a paperback. So we just did them both, a hardcover and a paperback.
If you're laying in bed at night, Kevin, and you're going to read a book, do you want a paperback or a hardback, or what is your preferred
Well,
method?
I want a hardback, but what it turns out to be usually is a manuscript, because I'm always editing something or reading somebody else's manuscript. So I actually don't read books in book form very much anymore. This has also gotten me kind of enthused, because I've been putting it off for a couple of years, and I finally just again squeezed it into my schedule, and I just wrote a brand new Dan Shamble novel called Tastes Like Chicken. So that's the 5th Dan Shamble novel, and Wordfire will have it published probably around November.
That's wonderful. It's also wonderful that you can have this sort of new franchise be your franchise and be in your own house. I mean, that's kind of great. But there's legitimacy to the franchise because you're doing other series from other authors, and many of whom I've actually talked to in the course of this show. Well, that's really cool. So, so the new, so Zomnibus, is it out already, or is it just coming out?
It's out already, and Tales of Dune is out already. Again, we did that one in hardcover as well as trade paperback, because collectors want the hardcover and readers just want the paperback or the ebook. So Tales of Dune and Zomnibus are out. Spine of the Dragon, like I said before, you can go to my wordfire.com website and sign up for the cost of a hardcover book. You can just read the drafts if that interests you.
Such an
and I've
interesting
got
experiment.
Tastes Like Chicken is, in fact, I'm leaving for a cabin in the mountains tomorrow, where I will be doing my second edit on that manuscript, and kind of like you did when you were going off off to write your book. So
yeah, I went down to my great grandma's farm and just hung out in the heat inside of a little farmhouse and worked on, in that case, on a nonfiction book. It can be nice to get away, but it's completely it. You said it yourself. It's a novelty. It's far from the usual kind of norm, but that's all right.
well, we
Wow.
don't have normal lives as writers. You grab every moment you can to do some writing, every possibility you can get it, and it's never enough, but you try to do as much as you can.
Well,
And
I
you love
think
what
to
you're
me,
doing. I mean, I
yeah, it's your reward. That's what's crazy to me, is that this is how is people go, boy, Jason, close your eyes. If you could go anywhere today and go do whatever the hell you want, what would you go do? I'm like, well, I'd go write. To me, there's nothing I want to do more. That's it. That's
That's
the only
exactly
thing.
it. People, I have like Rebecca's family that you're always work all the time. Why don't you come over and relax and play cards with us? And I go, because that's the hard part. I'm much more happy sitting here editing a manuscript or writing a manuscript, and I mean, not that I dislike the family or anything, but sitting around watching a football game or playing cards, that requires social effort, and I would much rather be doing my own stories.
Absolutely. All that stuff is hard. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Gosh, we got to do this once a year, because it's been really exciting catching up with you and talking about changes in publishing, but in the meantime, your new projects that are out are the Tales of Dune Expanded Edition and Zomnibus, both of those from Wordfire Press. And if if writers want to know more about Wordfire Press, or readers, either one, what's the Wordfire Press URL?
Wordfirepress.com. And
Wordfirepress.com.
my webpage is wordfire.com, so you just go one or the other and go back and forth. And wordfire.com is where you can go to the Spine of the Dragon thing if you wanted to check that one out.
Absolutely.
But it's just it's all so much fun. I wish I was cloned, because I still can't do a tenth of the things that I want to do. And there's just so many interesting things to do out there. And when somebody comes up to me and says, "I'm bored, I don't know what to do," you just kind of want to slap them, because can I have your spare time then?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got to do this once a year. There's always going to be stuff that we can talk about, because I'm busy all the time. You know that.
That's fabulous. That's really fabulous. All right, Kevin J. Anderson, it's always an honor to talk to you, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to get busy with the Zomnibus, and I will talk to you soon, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot,
Ciao.
Jason.